We were talking a little bit yesterday ahead of this interview, and some of the facts that you told me were absolutely mind-blowing. First of all, some of the fun facts. Where do people spend the most time in pubs?
In pubs. So we looked at this and we said, what is the biggest pub day of the year? And to our surprise, what we found, it was Mother's Day. Mother's Day, the biggest pub day of the year. Followed, actually by a wide margin, to the Friday before Christmas, when people are also going out to pubs, and then the Sunday right before May Day.
Yeah, which is amazing because it's something that you wouldn't think, because you basically have access to all this data, which means that you can crunch numbers and you really see where we're spending, where the retailer is going.
That's absolutely right.
What's the most surprising thing that you found out?
You know, the surprises that I've seen here, and I just have to give you two themes about consumer spending here in the UK, and it's about fiscal responsibility and value for money. So for the past 3 years running, consumers have just broken all of the old paradigms. Typically, Francine, what we would see in any kind of economic downturn, and particularly when unemployment is high, we would see people running up the balances on their credit card, trying to really revolve more, building their debt, and then we see losses higher. That has absolutely been the opposite over the past 3 years. In fact, if anything, what we've seen is amazing fiscal responsibility by UK consumers. Losses are at an all-time low. People have kept their balances down. They're at about 13% below where they were at their peak, and everyone is spending less. So for 3 years running, we saw that UK consumers, their spending growth was not keeping pace with the rate of inflation. Spending less overall and curbing it. And what's even more amazing is their spend patterns of what they were spending on. So you saw an absolute shift. Instead of travel, they were staying home and they were treating themselves with the cinema or going out for a pizza.
See, that's amazing, Val, because we also have GDP figures out of the UK later on, and this is still an economy that's being driven by consumption. So we consume less, but people are still consuming. Has it changed in the last 3 years what we spend on? You're mentioning there the fact that people maybe go out less, but will rent a movie or something like that, or will go to the movies.
You know, they're spending almost at the same pace right now if you look at the number of purchases, but it's far less per purchase. So instead of going to more upscale restaurants, they're going more to fast food and shifting. Instead of going to the higher brands for clothing, they're actually, shopping for bargains. And we can see the shift in all of the spend patterns, even as people move from spending less on petrol, more on public transportation.
That's fascinating. Is it different the way a woman spends to a man? I guess, women tend to spend more online.
One of the key questions I always get asked of who spends more. And when I ask people what they expect, most people say they expect women to be shopping more frequently, but probably less per transaction. Actually, we found men and women shop with the same frequency. However, men on average will spend about 9% more on the transactions. And this is across all categories, as you'll see. They will spend 9% more. Now, what they spend on is a little bit different.
A little bit different.
Yes. So men, 55 to 60% or so of all online spend or do-it-yourself, restaurants, travel, booked by men. 55 to 60% of all supermarket or clothing spent by women.
See, I'm surprised because if you look at that chart, right, it's actually not that different. I was expecting that chart to be vastly different, for men to maybe buy more of the white goods. And this, I guess, is just stereotypes, which you don't see when you look at the card spending.
It's absolutely true. It was much more even than we were all expecting. But again, just that one fact is men will spend slightly more on a transaction than a woman.
Val, what about online?
Online, you see the same phenomenon, and it's very, very interesting. There has been a real growth in online that we've seen, really driven by the fact that people want value for money. So with the same shift that we have seen of people moving away from brands to going for value, they've been shopping online really to do comparison shopping. So people will still go into the stores, but then shop online for really the best bargain.
And have you seen an increase, a significant increase? Because we have a lot of chief executives. So we have a lot of investors here, and they say, I want a company that's very present online. Then you speak to the chief executive, and they say, well, I have 4 or 5% of my sales online, but that's not where people want to shop. What are you seeing?
We're seeing of all card spending, so I'm talking about debit and credit card spending across the entire UK, about 20% of all spending is online now. And that is growing. So I think really what's remarkable is the growth rate. That was only about 15% if you went back, 24 months or so. So the growth online is pretty phenomenal. And again, people looking for the value. So they will comparison shop online far more than they ever have before.
Val, the Christmas season, of course, is so crucial. What are you expecting? Is it difficult to predict, or is there anything that you can predict in terms of how people will spend differently at Christmas compared to last Christmas?
Well, what we've seen the past 6 months running were the first 6 months in 3 years that consumer spending is just outpacing inflation, which gives me some degree of confidence. And it shows the confidence of UK consumers of getting back to spending, but just a bit more. Still fiscally responsible, but spending a bit more. The only trend I would say is that although they're spending more, they're still spending less and less per purchase. So again, shows the value for money. So what we're expecting for the Christmas season is good, but not great.